Hello everybody and welcome again to Timber Talks. Today we are at a beautiful forest in Argyll in which Tilhill manages. It's around about 42 hectares in size. Fraser, can you tell us a bit more about this site?
Well, the land's owned by Forestry and Land Scotland, and we'll harvest it as part of our LTC contract with them. We've got Dick Brothers contractor in to do the harvesting. There's about 20,000 cubic metres, mainly Sitka spruce and a bit of Japanese larch to come out of here, and some pretty big areas of windblow to clear up as well. So yeah, we'll probably be in here for the rest of the year, working away.
So this is part of a much bigger complex forest that's managed by Forestry and Land Scotland. So part of the sustainable ongoing harvest that will take place across this area every year. So 42 hectares, I'm not sure the total size of the forest, but it will just represent a very small percentage, perhaps 1 or 2% of the overall forest that we're in. So these sites will be many years in preparation. We'll start out with a forest design plan that will set out the felling in detail for 5 years and in outline for 20 years. The site will then be handed over to the harvesting company to undertake the detailed preparation of the site, and that will take us potentially several months. Fraser, what are some of the constraints that we've got on this site?
The main ones are environmental constraints with different species. There's a big buzzard nest in the middle of the coop there, which will have a buffer zone around, and we can't work in that area until after the nesting season there.
So once the chicks have fledged?
Yeah, they've already gone
right
now, so we'll start working into that buffer zone.
And how
soon.
big that's at? How many metres is that?
At the moment it's a 200 metre buffer.
Exclusion zone around that. And other constraints that we've got on the site?
There's a few old squirrel drays in here as well, and they're so the environmental forester from FLS will survey the site and mark out all the drays which are on our hazards and constraints map, and everyone's aware where they are, and we'll leave those trees standing until their nesting season is over at the end of September there. A couple of other constraints is the ground conditions. It's very flat in here, and being so wet in this area, it's a bit of a swamp in places, so it's quite challenging on the machines. So we've got quite a small forwarder working in here, a John Deere 1210, which will have a bit of a lower ground impact than some of the bigger machines we're used to working with. And then just the big pockets of windblow as well, which can be quite dangerous, especially for chainsaw operators. So we tend to not put chainsaw operators into windblow and just
mechanise that wherever we can.
Yeah.
And so when the site started, but before we had any operations on site, you would have been looking at those constraints and setting the site out, agreeing with the operators, this area we're going to do at this time, these other areas will maybe leave till later. That will all be recorded on the map and documented.
Yeah, that's all documented before we start working. We'll have a pre-commencement meeting where we'll discuss everything beforehand as well, just to agree a plan for how the site's to be worked.
And then through your supervision of the site, you're here perhaps once a week?
Usually me or my colleague will be here once a week.
And then you'll record that, you'll probably take some photographs very often, and electronic
there's
site
a lot
diary.
Of kind of detailed site notes that we'll take with photos of what's happening on sites, and if there's anything that needs to be picked up on, like maybe a log bridge needing rebuilt over a watercourse to make sure they're protected, or photos of the kind of retention areas that we'll be leaving, just to make sure we're leaving those.
And you'll you'll be looking at the condition of the water on site, making sure that the burns are clean, that there's no siltation.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important to maintain the water quality from all the watercourses coming from the site, and we'll take kind of regular water samples to make sure everything's running clear.
Yeah. Is public access an issue on this site?
It's not on this road, but there's another forest road at the other end of the site which has high public access. So we'll need to make sure we have bankspersons in place for when we're felling next to the roadside, and we'll need to have quite robust signage up there as well, kind of stopping members of the public from walking onto site.
So this site has been handed over to us to harvest, and there are threshold signs all the way round on any paths or tracks or forest roads coming into it that tell people not to go past them, but people do ignore them, and then so we have to, if we do see that, the machines have to, if we see people walking to risk zones, machines and things like that, the operators will stop them until they move out. And in areas of high pressure, we'll indeed have people on the ground stopping people walking through if we're concerned that public pressure is becoming too much of an issue. We've got an area of windblow in here. We've got quite extensive pockets of windblow in this site.
Yeah, I think there's maybe about 15 hectares windblow.
So what's that? That's about 25-30% maybe.
Yeah, it'd be something like that.
And some of this is quite old. I mean, some of the trees there look like they could have been down for 4 or 5 years, but it would have been going on progressively, getting worse and worse. And ultimately, if we don't take these trees, the rest of them will blow down. And indeed, you can see they're losing their crowns and things a bit.
Yeah, I think in a few years that would all be gone, really.
Yeah. So we're still recovering some value out of it while we can. And then the older dead stuff will probably go away for biomass or something like that.
Yeah, we'll kind of extract what we can from it, and any dead wood will go as fuel wood for biomass plants there.
And then there'll probably be some dead wood left on the site, which will be a home for invertebrates. And
yeah, we'll leave some standing dead wood, which is for the kind of biodiversity for all the bugs and beasties to eat on.
So behind us we've got a 1470 John Deere. It's the largest harvester in the Dick Brothers fleet. They've got somewhere in the region of 28-30 harvesters. This would be one of the most productive machines. They're saying that he'll probably cut 1,200 cube.
Yeah, he cuts about 1,200 cubic metres a week. And there's some quite big timber in here, so the big machine is well suited to the
How much of the country's timber does this forest supply?
We're moving about 30 to 40 lorry loads a week out of here, so between sort of 750 and 1,000 tonnes a week.
Just from this one side?
Yeah, about 20 loads will be for the sawmill at Kilmally, so about 500 tonnes a week for Kilmally, which will cut about 10,000 a week.
About a 20th, 5% of what the sawmill requires is coming from this site. So significant in at the moment while we're harvesting this site, and this is probably going to go on for 4 or 5 months, 6 months?
We'll probably be getting close to finishing at the end of the year.
Yeah, so it's an important part of the overall supply position within Fort William. So currently at roadside we've got some 3/7 logs, 12 foots in old money, which is why we have this length, because if you're in Europe you'd have a 3 metre or a 4 metre. And then behind us we've got some 4.9 logs, so 16 foots again in old money, whereas in Europe they'd be cutting a log that's 5 metres long. And then underneath, and we're just using them as bearers, they must be at the 6.2s or the 8 metres.
They're the 8.1s.
So some 8.1s going to our specialist sawmill near Edinburgh, Peter's Muir. So not too much stock at roadside at the moment. So we've also got some 4.3 logs here. Fort William sawmills cutting 4.3s. We're doing quite a few more from this part of the world.
Yeah, we'll do about 1,000 tonnes every couple of months from here to Kilmally.
So that's going to make coming out of the sawmill a product of 4.2, or maybe more likely we'll be cutting it into some different sort of pallet wood length. So it will then be cut up into some multiple that will end up at 4.2 metres. And then we've got some lodgepole pine here. So this crop's obviously planted with lodgepole pine. So what's that going for? Just 3 metre chip?
Yeah, it'll just go as
biomass
fuel
or
wood.
something. And Caledonian.
Yeah, that'll go to UPM Caledonian for their biomass plant there.
We'll never really do anything else with pine, do we? We'll never cut any bars out of it or anything?
Yeah, you cut the occasional fence and spec and maybe the odd 3/7, but there's not many mills that will take 3.7 pine around this neck of the woods.
No, right. When we start off these contracts, you guys do a lot of planning in terms of setting out a really a whole design plan around how you're going to extract the timber, and then how you're going to manage control the water runoff, so that we're not putting silt into, first of all, the drains and then ultimately into the burns.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll pick an area of like the kind of hardest ground possible for our main extractions. So it's really soft ground in here. So it's important to walk through the site and pick the best routes for your main extractions. And then we'll cut shorter racks going off the main extractions.
So herringbone off the side of here?
Yeah. And then we'll clear out those shorter racks and lift the brash off them to improve the main extraction route there.
So we're taking the lop and top that we don't recover from the forest, and we're putting that into our main extraction routes to protect the ground.
Yeah.
At times we'll get excavators in to sort of build catch pits and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it doesn't get to that stage that you're needing to bring excavators in, but yeah, you see it on steeper ground quite a lot where kind of gravity takes hold of the water running down the slope, and you need to ditch all your main extractions to prevent the water kind of coming onto your track there.
And increasingly these days we'll stop operations so that if it does get too wet, then the forwarder will stop for a day or two.
Yeah, there's times where you can't really do anything just because the amount of rainfall we get in Argyll. Sometimes you'll get a torrential spell for a couple of days, and it's just impossible to work in those conditions. So you just have to stop, which it happens occasionally, but it's not ideal.
And culturally, that's been quite a change in the sector, really, because I think 10 years ago, forestry contractors, the nature of their problem solvers, they would have found a way through. Whereas now, it's good to see that the guys understand when there's a problem, and instead of trying to batter on, they accept that they've got to stop for 24 hours.
No, I mean, a lot of the operators are pretty conscientious about water management. Got a kind of good bunch of guys working for us, and they'll make those calls because they're the ones on site every day.
And we've done quite a bit of investment in terms of training these guys. We've produced some videos and which we require people to have watched before they work on our sites, and indeed held stand down days training days when we've looked at water management.
Yeah, we've had a few kind of training days with SEPA as well, the kind of Scottish Environmental Protection Agency.
Yeah, so we work very closely with them.
Yeah, they've been really useful as well.
So interesting just to talk about some of the species we've got, some of the restocking that's been going on previous clear fell areas. These trees behind us are probably somewhere in the region of 10 years old. Immediately behind us we've got some natural regeneration Sitka spruce, but further back we've got some planted Sitka spruce which will be improved. So by that the breeding's been improved within the nurseries. We've also got Norway spruce there. So Sitka spruce is the greeny blue tree, that tends to be the fastest growing tree that we'll have within the forest. Norway spruce, which is a European cousin of it, is a lighter green spruce tree, and then we've also got a larch tree here almost immediately behind us. It's also growing vigorously. Sadly, larch gets a disease these days, Phytophthora ramorum, so it's very unlikely that that will reach full maturity. That will probably become infected at some point and die, which is a real shame, because as foresters we've lost that diversity, that species that's both commercial and attractive to look at within the forest. We can't use that. Otherwise on site, also interesting, we've got some western hemlock I'd noticed that was regenerating along the sides of the roads. There must be some stands of hemlock within here. We wouldn't tend to grow western hemlock so much these days. It tends to be prone to butt rot and things like that. But perhaps as we try and diversify the species palette, it's something we'll be looking at again as time goes forward.